at a random time in mid-morning as well, don't they?
Yeah, but I mean, the other thing they do, which makes me sick, on BBC Four, they keep showing us repeats. Very good documentaries, but I've seen it 3 times. You know, Time Watch about, canal boats and Time Watch about trams. You know, make more of those programmes. That's what you're here for. Don't just repeat it every day in, day out.
Now, those people who wanted the TV licence to be removed, including our last caller, John from London, are going to be in for a scare, I'm afraid, because the licence fee is guaranteed for another 11 years. I guess they couldn't find a better way of funding it, even though there are public service remits in this country being funded by advertising, namely Channel 4, and they've closed that little loophole which says that if you've got an iPad, you can access the BBC without paying a licence fee no longer, because the real iPlayer, the BBC iPlayer, is going to be part of that funding model now. So the BBC's way of being funded through the licence fee is guaranteed for at least another 11 years. But there are still people who resist the TV licence fee. It is a well-argued case, not least by John in London about 15 minutes ago, but also this gentleman by the name of Mark. A very good evening to you, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
Good evening. Hi.
Mark, now, as John put it very succinctly, there are people being arrested for paying what is essentially a poll tax to a bunch of lovies. Apparently we fund them more than those people in the police force. Everyone wants to work for the BBC. It's a nicer job than working for the police on a day-to-day basis. I suppose you are of that ilk. But unfortunately today, you've been outlawed for 11 years.
Well, I mean, there are some good things in the announcement today and some things that we're not so keen on. I think it would have been unrealistic to see the government actually abolish the TV licence today. We as an organisation, we're here to oppose the TV licence, and our reasoning for that is as much in terms of the remit of the BBC as it is the very poor approach that the BBC has to enforcement as well. And we're going to continue our opposition to the BBC's enforcement process.
So is that your argument? You don't like the enforcement process, so you're for the BBC and the lies, but you don't? No.
Well, our organisation includes all sorts of different people who have different views, obviously.
Yeah.
Some are more opposed to the BBC than others. Personally, I can see value from public service broadcasting, but as you say, Channel 4 already fulfills a public service remit without the need for a TV licence.
Now, if you disagree with the way the BBC goes about charging people who don't pay for their licence fee, we're going to have an increased free-for-all of people saying, well, it looks like we can get away with it, so why bother?
Well, I think that's one of the good arguments for abolishing the licence entirely, that at the moment it's kind of unenforceable. What's happening is the BBC's agents are finding a number of people every year who don't understand their own rights and who allow themselves to be bullied by the BBC's agents into confessing to the offence, which there's absolutely no need for them to confess to the offence. It's only their lack of knowledge of their own rights that
they do try and fool people, don't they? They try and sort of trick people into letting them in and stuff like that. And
But what about the rest of us who pay it? We might be idiots paying it, but we are funding the hundreds of thousands of people who deliberately do not pay it, and that's not fair either, Mark.
Well, no, I think that's one of the reasons why we welcome the announcement today that iPlayer will move under the TV licence. It will make it much more straightforward morally and legally to say, if you don't want a TV licence, that's fine. You can still use all of the non-BBC catch-up services. You can use Netflix and Amazon and YouTube, and there's loads and loads of stuff out there that you can access. Some of it's free, some of it you have to subscribe to. And it, in terms of its quality, it more than outweighs what the BBC can produce many times over.
Exactly, and what we'll see with the iPlayer is there'll be a website that will play all the iPlayer stuff for free.
Yeah, I mean,
that's
basically that. Yeah, I think what will happen, I think the BBC's hoping that people will be so attached to using the iPlayer that they'll willingly buy a £145 licence for the year to use it, but that makes it more than twice as expensive as Netflix. Yeah. And I actually can't see people doing that. I think a lot more people will actually go the other way and say that now that it's nice and clear that, there's a relationship there. If I watch Channel 4, the advertising that I'm being shown pays for that service, and there's no need for a licence fee to be involved in that at all.
You could actually pay for individual...
We make the same argument for the transmitted service as well.
You could actually pay for individual programmes on iPlayer. They could do that model, couldn't they? You pay, 30 pence for this programme. And
yeah, I suspect that may well come down the line at some point. But I think initially they will be looking to see what kind of take-up they get for the full licence fee for people who are primarily using iPlayer. And I think they've taken a big gamble on that, and I'm not sure that it's going to pay off.
I was going to say, they have launched into an 11-year guarantee that this is the way that the BBC will be funded. Now, 11 years ago, the internet looked completely different. There was no Twitter. Yeah. The iPlayer was probably in its development infancy, and the way that the transmitters were switched off all those years ago in favour of streamed television, which is basically what we have now to a very large extent, means that the licence fee can't really be renewed again in 11 years' time. This is a kind of sort of interim period, isn't it, before the kind of revolution?
Yeah, I think it's very unlikely. I think once the majority of people are viewing TV over live streaming, there's no excuse then to not have it on a secure subscription basis. The issue at the moment is obviously a lot of people are watching by satellite or Freeview, and those are more difficult to lock down. But as soon as it goes on to live streaming and 75-80% of people are using it that way, then it becomes a no-brainer, really, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be subscription at that point.
And the population, is the youth are different the way they their televisual diet. They watch everything on their iPads. They don't sort of like we would sit in our lounge and watch telly. It's a sort of different model, and I think as life goes on, it is. People come through. It won't be natural to sit in your lounge and watch a TV like that. You'll just be watching it on your tablets.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all the demographics are pointing in the opposite direction to the way that the BBC would prefer it.
Yeah.
And I think it's as people who are used to watching TV in that way are not constrained by a schedule. They're not all sitting around in the living room with their slippers and their pipes, and they're not consuming TV in that way anymore.
I'll tell you what, though, Mark. I mean, I know a couple of programmers at Radio 1. Obviously, I'm trying to get myself a show there to talk to the youngsters. And I think I'm about 21 years too old for that. But never mind, I'll keep trying. They've got initials and then the word strong in front of them. I think that's what you have to be. Strong P, I think you have to be called to be a DJ there now.
Yeah.
But seriously, what they're trying to do is trying to bridge that cultural gap between the kids who are downloading in a different way to try and encourage, through our licence fee, the charm, the enjoyment, the pleasure of listening to the radio like us old fuddy-duddies do. Good idea.
I don't know. I think the BBC has always had that kind of element, slightly sinister element of
social engineering.
Sorry?
Social engineering?
Social engineering, I think that's a bit strong, but they've certainly been trying to get down with the kids, and they've been doing that for a long, long while. Yeah. And there's an issue there. The average age of the BBC One and BBC Two viewer is over 60.
Yeah, they're all a bit square, BBC. They can't get down with the kids, you know what I mean? They're all a bit like Andy Peters, you know what I mean? A bit square.
Yeah, it's a strange organisation from that point of view.
Toby Anstis, they're all a bit Philip Schofield. It was
Matt Baker.
They're all a bit square, aren't they?
We're just accusing all these people. They're not square. They're
of course they are. Matt Baker who's sitting on his farmyard. Oh, look at this pig!
Mark,
isn't it great?
Mark, do you agree?
Hi.
Of course he agrees.
Oh, Mark's still here. Thank goodness. Thank you, mate. Yeah. Now, Mark. You say it's a bit sinister, but Lord Reith said all those years ago, inform, educate and entertain, but also we have heard the R word this week as well, represent. And soon...
Trying to get down with the kids again.
Spelt wrong.
Represent.
But, soon those 14-year-olds who are trying to represent right, will one day be 18-year-old licence fee payers. So at some point, we've got to kind of curry favour with the kids, otherwise there'll be no more BBC because there won't be any demand for it.
I mean, this is just the beginning of the discussion on the BBC. You've seen an awful lot of stuff going through the media in the last couple of months, and there's more and more of this to come. I think what the government are trying to do, and I think they're right to do it, is they're trying to get some sort of consensus from the industry and from the public as to what they actually want the BBC to be and what they want it to do. After all, they say it's our BBC, and I think that kind of has to mean something, rather than be a sort of a slightly aloof PR sort of phrase. So how are they going to engage with the public, and how are the public going to tell the BBC and the government what they want the BBC to do? Those average viewer ages, they're not doing the BBC any favours that the average age of BBC One viewers is 60. That's a problem for them, and also it's a problem for the government in trying to align the BBC to those, 18, 20-year-olds coming along starting to pay the licence fee. And there's a big question as to what should the BBC do for us? How should it fit into an industry now that's incredibly vibrant and diverse? Where are the areas where it actually isn't necessary for the BBC to do something because other people are already doing it really well within the marketplace?
Well, Chris Evans made a very good point.
There's all sorts of questions there that need to be answered.
Chris Evans made a very good point. He said, the job we're in is so privileged. We're paid an enormous amount. We get to do things that you can't even pay to do. Yeah. Maybe we should be paid less. I mean, obviously, he's already made his millions. It's all right for him. But he makes a fair point, doesn't he? Should the BBC be nurturing new talent that, when it becomes successful, goes to the commercial sector and then just gets newer and newer talent?
I think so. I think it's really very, very hard to justify the overall big picture where the BBC takes its money from some of the poorest people in the country and then it gives that money to people who are some of the richest people in the country. Yeah. And it just really doesn't make sense. The broadcasting is an industry where everybody wants to be in there somewhere. And there's no shortage of people sort of clamouring to get on the air and do the latest stunts or present music shows or tech shows or anything.
Yeah, you don't need to pay them £250,000.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I think there's a good argument there to say that let's cap the salaries at the BBC for now, and let's look at bringing on lots more new talent. And actually getting some fresher ideas and fresher faces onto the air as well.
Exactly.
Indeed. Mark, the campaign begins here.
Indeed.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us,
Mark.
And talking tonight about the future of the BBC. Do you agree with the points that Mark made? What about the points that John made earlier? John was a bit more extreme than
He was a
Mark,
militant, wasn't he?
But essentially, they're talking from a similar hymn sheet.
Yeah.
And